Welcome to EdTech Stories. My name is Richard Colosi. This is the debut episode of this new podcast series, and I'm excited to share with you the origin stories of the technology teachers are using in the classroom every day. Today's podcast is focused on the company Wakelet. Over the past 2 years or so, Wakelet has been one of the most talked about EdTech platforms on social media. It may seem like they just kind of came out of nowhere, but this is a company that's been around for over 6 years. And on today's show, we'll explore their journey. You'll hear how Wakelet's founder came up with the idea to organize the web, his struggle to find investment, the connection between Wakelet and one of the most popular iPhone games of all time, and how the closing of one EdTech tool allowed thousands of educators to discover Wakelet. That and much more on today's episode of EdTech Stories. This podcast is called Inside the Wake. Stay with us. Okay, so take a listen to this. It's the sound of an aircraft flying across the sky. And when you hear this sound and look up in the air, you might notice the white trail that follows the aircraft. This is known as the wake. Now, I must have seen aircraft wakes hundreds of times in my life and never really gave them much thought. But after researching this episode, what I learned is that if you take the time to study it, you can actually learn a lot looking at a wake. Things like the humidity at that altitude, the wind direction and the speed, the size and maybe even the type of the aircraft. You'll see a starting and ending point. The wake itself, it shares a journey. And the focus of today's podcast is the website known as Wakelet. And you'll learn that the aerospace industry plays a significant role in that company's journey. Wakelet is a platform that allows users to curate all kinds of information on the internet to create their own stories, known as wakes. And the story of Wakelet starts in Manchester, UK.
Types of cities where it's small enough to be quaint and intimate and familiar, but at the same time, it's big enough to be quite cosmopolitan with lots of different things going on at the same time.
That's the voice of Misbah Gedal. He's the current director of partnerships at Wakelet and a lifelong Manchester resident.
I mean, Manchester's a great place to live. You know, there's always something happening in the city. And, I've lived here my whole life. It's a great place to live and it's a fantastic place to work.
Misbah joined the team in around 2014, years after the original idea for the platform first came about. So, where does it begin? Well, the idea behind Wakelet begins with founder Jamil Khalil, who was raised in the Manchester neighborhood of Moss Side. Now, Moss Side was a neighborhood in Manchester with a reputation for guns and gang violence. Jamil's mother passed away when he was 12, and shortly after, his father lost his job. This left Jamil to work multiple jobs to support his younger siblings. At the same time, he was trying to put himself through school. Here's Jamil discussing his childhood.
So it's probably not normal in every household, but I had to start working from the age of 13. And I kind of worked in a lot of different jobs, basically anything that would take me, from restaurants to coaching sports, and then eventually to security at nightclubs. And because of this, I didn't really have much time to study, and it really had an impact on my education. I didn't really do so well at school. I had to redo some of my exams, and to be honest, it was really embarrassing.
While this time in his life was obviously very challenging, Jamil would eventually graduate and enjoy a successful career with the European aerospace company Airbus. And it's somewhere between his time at university and his job as head of supply at Airbus that he got the idea for what would become Wakelet. But it wasn't just one event that gave him this idea. Instead, it was a series of struggles throughout his life, organizing content and other types of information. When I interviewed him, Jamil shared these experiences with me. The first happened when he was a student at university.
I used to spend a lot of time researching online and also bookmarking all sorts of content, whether it's for my studies or because I wanted to travel somewhere or just because I wanted to buy a product. And I bookmarked so many things that they all got lost between each other. And I found myself having to take these links and store them into Word documents, so I was able to categorize them all. And to make it more personal, I'd just add a bit of text around it. I might add some images and photos, and if I wanted to share them, I'd just send the document by email.
The second was after university. He traveled the world and his friends would all have the same questions. What places did you visit and what sites did you see?
So I went on the internet and I would do all these searches looking for information for them. And the search engines would just return millions and millions of results. So I'd spend a lot of time trying to find the right articles, videos, blogs, tweets, just so I can show them where I've been and what I've done through content that other people have created. And again, I'd take the links, I'd put them all in a Word document, I'd make them my own by adding pictures, notes, just to make it more contextual around me, and then I'll send it over to them. But believe me, it was so time consuming and laborious. And I thought to myself, look, there must be a better way of doing this. But to be fair, at that stage I was broke and I didn't really care.
Maybe he didn't care at that time, but when he was working at Airbus about 7 years later, well, he would care. One day, out of the blue, Jamil would take a call from one of his suppliers looking for results about a program that Jamil's team was working on. The problem was there were thousands of results about this program online, but they just weren't visible through search engines.
And one day, one of my suppliers came to me and said, Jam, you know, we've invested a lot of money in these technologies and we've not yet received any big purchase orders. And we know that trialing and procuring things takes time, but for now, we kind of want to share some information with our investors about your use cases, about your success stories, some of your presentations, some of your videos, just to show them that the market is moving and there's that real traction. And when we try to find this information on the internet, it's just like a minefield. I mean, you know where this information is, you know the best quality links there are online, and it'll be useful if you can help us kind of put it together and help us show it to them.
Sometime after this third experience, Jamil thought of a solution to this issue, a website that would make it easy to curate and share all kinds of information, a platform where he could organize the web.
Our idea was quite simple. We wanted to create a platform that basically enabled people to organize any content on the web. So it could be articles, videos, blogs, tweets, basically anything with a link, into beautiful, meaningful collections. And these collections could be private or public. And we wanted people to have the ability to kind of reorder their content at any time, add images, text, and share it with others if they wanted to.
That basic idea that Jamil just shared was about all that he had. At this time, there was no product, no development team, not even much of a business plan. But what Jamil did have were some contacts through work, a group of successful CEOs and entrepreneurs who would advise Jamil on how to proceed, or at least how they thought he should proceed. They told him, put a slide deck together. We'll connect you with some investors, pitch your idea, and you'll get your money. Easy. Jamil estimates that he visited over 100 investors in the US and the UK. He gave them that pitch, and out of all these meetings that he took, how many investors do you think gave him money?
0.
Over 100 investors rejected his initial pitch. Why did this happen? Here's Jamil's thoughts.
To be honest, there's so many startups out there trying to do all sorts of things. And the reality is that some investors have been burnt and they don't really know what's going to work and what's not going to work. So when I walked in there asking for £3 million, I just got sent home. I was pretty disappointed back then, but if I look back, it was just probably too risky for them. And if I was in their shoes, I would have probably done the same.
So to me, this is probably the most interesting part of Wakelet's journey. Think of it like this. We've all interviewed for a job or auditioned for a role or maybe tried it for a sports team. You prepare, you think positively, and you get excited for the possibility. And when that doesn't happen, when you get rejected, even just one time, it can be disappointing. It can be kind of a deflating feeling. Now multiply that feeling times 100. So after all this rejection to a lot of people, it would be easy to get discouraged. Write this experience off as a loss and move on to something else. But this didn't work for Jamil. He felt strongly about the idea. At the time, he was traveling around the world for Airbus, working long hours, and he didn't really have a lot of spare time. When he did have a free moment, he found himself continuing to explore this idea. He was determined and driven, and after some reflection, Jamil discovered what he was doing wrong.
I realised that people just wanted more. At the end of the day, we're in the UK, and people here are just a little bit more risk averse. They don't jump in early and invest in areas that they're really unsure of. People want to see a full working product, they want to see significant traction, they want to see a management team, and they want to see companies making money. And to me, as a tech entrepreneur, we can't expect every business to be strong in all these areas, especially early on. We need to take some risks and invest in people and ideas. I'm sure that a lot of the American tech giants would have never got off the ground if they started here. That's why the US is in its own league and has more success stories. But that's what I had to do. I had to find a team, build a product, and get some traction before I was able to find people willing to get involved.
But without financing, how do you put together that management team, build a product, and gain traction? Jamil wasn't completely sure either. Initially, he tried to outsource his project to a team in India, but the venture didn't turn out to be successful. But it was a random encounter at an airport of all places that ended up putting the wheels in motion.
One day when I was still working at Airbus, I was flying back to Manchester via Brussels, and I had about a 5-minute delay at the luggage carousel. So I ended up speaking to somebody who was also on the flight.
That person in the luggage line was Rick Butterworth, Wakelet's employee number 1 and the current user interface designer. Here's what Rick remembers.
For me, being an avid aviation enthusiast since the age of 8, connecting with someone like Jamil, who was working at one of the most recognised aircraft manufacturers in the world, was an exciting moment. So I insisted in staying in touch by connecting with him on LinkedIn.
When I got home, I looked at his profile, and I noticed that he'd basically studied a similar degree to me, which was aerospace, and that he'd went also to the same university. When I kept reading through his profile, I realised he was a web designer, and I was like, amazing. Okay, maybe I'm going to reach out to him, arrange to meet up and see if he wants to join me. And that's what I did. And to cut a long story short, he liked what I showed him and he agreed to join just for shares.
So Rick was on board with Jamil in exchange for shares of the company thanks to this connection that he made on LinkedIn. But right from the start, there were some major challenges that Rick had to overcome as a developer.
The first few months of Wakelet was certainly challenging. We'd made a decision to use a development team in India because we were lacking the resources to help build the application we wanted. The problem we did face was the lack of access we had to the code base. The entire process became slow and unproductive.
After these struggles that Rick experienced, it was clear to Jamil what he needed to do next. It was time to build his own development team in Manchester.
And then I thought, okay, so I found one person this way. Maybe I can just stalk people on LinkedIn in the Manchester area and see if I can find more people that would join for shares and work in the evenings and weekends because they've seen a nice opportunity to do something different and at low risk. And that's how I found my initial team of 5 people. And the great thing was, they were not motivated by money. It was more by what we were trying to do.
Still, convincing random strangers on LinkedIn to essentially work for free for an unknown company to develop a product which didn't exist definitely doesn't sound easy. I wanted to know what his pitch sounded like. So Jamil actually went back into his LinkedIn account and located an original email that he sent to prospective employees about 7 or 8 years ago.
Yeah, so I'll give you an idea. It was something along these lines that I prepared. It says, hey, firstly, thank you for accepting my invite. It's always difficult reaching out to people on the web that you don't know. I've been working with a small team on a new content curation platform. It's a really interesting and exciting concept with a lot of potential. The main challenge has been to secure early stage financing in the UK.
So after reviewing hundreds of resumes and sending dozens and dozens of emails, Jamil was able to put together a team of 5 Manchester residents to bring his idea to life. They still didn't really have much of an investment. The majority of this venture was funded through Jamil's salary at Airbus. And like Rick, the rest of the group was working for free in exchange for shares in the company. So on nights and weekends and during any time off, this group worked out of Jamil's apartment to develop a prototype that they would call Wakelet.
The idea was that when you add things together from the internet, so articles, videos, blogs, tweets, or your own text, you're kind of creating a story by piecing these things together and giving them some context. And we wanted something that symbolises this in the real world. So we kept on looking at words like paths, trails, and eventually we looked up in the air and we saw the trail or the wake of an aircraft. And we thought, what a cool name. I mean, if you look up, you can see aircraft in the skies, creating trails, wakes, and stories. And the same with boats on the sea. So that was where the name behind Wakelet came from.
After some time, the team was able to put together what now looks like a primitive version of Wakelet. It definitely wasn't perfect, but Jamil's original thinking was that having a working prototype would make it easier to secure investment. And he was right. After a lot of hard work and perseverance and lots of pitching, finally Jamil was able to secure the seed funding for Wakelet through a number of different investors. In fact, when I was talking to Jamil, he shared a story of how he connected with one of Wakelet's minority investors, and it's pretty interesting. Thanks to a connection with a lawyer, Jamil found himself pitching to a room of investors. A room of, well, older investors.
So I was offered this opportunity to go and speak at a small private event. And when I got there, no disrespect to anybody in the room, I felt like the people in the room were like about 200 years old. I was like, God, no way, no one's going to even understand and want to listen to me. They're not going to care about an internet platform. Maybe more like, what is the internet? But by the end of the talk, a couple of people approached me who really liked the idea and what we were doing. They said to me they could see the real potential and vision of the business, and they were happy to see something like this in the UK and wanted to get involved.
Two of those people were Chris Byatt and Joe Wee. You might not recognize their name, but I'm thinking that you may recognize the theme to their most well-known video game. Byatt and Wee were the minds behind Shalingo, the company that published the smash mobile hit Angry Birds on iOS and other games like Cut the Rope. In 2011, the two sold Shalingo to video game giant Electronic Arts for $20 million. Since then, they had been looking to invest in a startup. And on this day, the minds behind Shalingo were in the crowd, among the other 200-year-old investors, of course. So what was it exactly that made these two want to invest? In an interview with Insider Media, Byatt and Wee commented that they were impressed by Jamil's passion and his desire to organize the web. They hammered him with questions, and he seemed to give them great responses. Plus, they took a look at Wakelet, and they loved how the interface looked. So after years of getting rejected, Jamil finally secured the funding he needed to launch Wakelet, thanks to several different investors. He quit his job at Airbus to work full-time on Wakelet. But there wasn't a lot of time to celebrate, because he needed to figure out a way to brand this platform. And his solution was robots.
The internet is organized by search robots. And the problem with robots is they don't always get it right. They send the data that they think is relevant. And robots can't tell stories. They're not capable of connecting things in a way that surprises us. They don't make observations. It's time to wake up, because the humans are coming.
That audio comes from a 2014 launch video which highlighted the human-centered approach to curation that Wakelet allows. The humans are coming would be Wakelet's marketing slogan, and still is today. Here's Misbah Gedal, Wakelet's Director of Partnerships, on the backstory of robots.
So the robots essentially represent the artificial intelligence side of the internet, right? Like the algorithms, the AI, the machine learning. And these technologies do an awesome job when it comes to processing billions of pieces of data at the same time, indexing search results, finding patterns in data and that sort of thing. But when it comes to telling stories, when it comes to, threading pieces of content together in a meaningful way, when it comes to curating content in a way that can move somebody, we believe that human beings are the absolute best at that, no competition. And that led to our phrase, the humans are coming.
Now, speaking of Misbah, he came on board around the same time in 2014. The new funding not only allowed Jamil to develop a more robust version of Wakelet, but also to create new positions, such as the head of marketing job that Misbah was originally hired for.
So it's quite a funny story, actually. I just returned from working abroad. I returned back to Manchester. I was working in law and I wanted a change of career. But initially I found it really difficult to find a technology company that I could join that was really visionary and, game changing, especially in Manchester. So I decided, I'm going to try and, create a company myself. And the idea that I had was actually quite similar in functionality to Wakelet. But anyway, in trying to find employees to join my sort of fledgling idea startup, like literally right at the concept stage, I stumbled across Wakelet, and I thought, this looks like something different. I did some research online and I found that, this was an established company and it was right on my doorstep. So I got in touch with Jamil, and Jamil invited me to the Wakelet offices. And once I got there and I kind of walked up the stairs and boom, all of a sudden I was in a legitimate office. I was in, a tech startup in the really traditional sense of the word. There were people coding. They had, a small design team, small marketing team, and immediately I was transfixed. I had a good conversation with Jamil. We talked a little bit about, our ideas and his plans and sort of his vision of how he can change the internet, how Wakelet can change the internet. And, as they say, the rest is history. I immediately expressed interest in joining, and one thing just led to the next.
Now, this might be the part where you think Wakelet starts to develop momentum and gains users instantly, but that wouldn't happen for a few years thanks to an issue with browser support. Rick explains a little more about this situation.
With the ever-growing advances in handheld devices such as smartphones and tablets, being sure you were compatible with all became more time-consuming and costly.
So it was clear to Rick, Jamil, and the rest of the team that for Wakelet to work how they originally had intended it to, it needed to be completely rebuilt, and that took some time.
We realized that if we wanted a stable platform that was both flexible and scalable, we had to decide what versions of browsers we were actually going to support. From there, we made a decision to choose a very young technology. Now, this decision was risky, but it actually paid off as companies such as Microsoft and Google began to end support for older browsers and only focus on modern technologies to help standardize the web.
By the time that this project was finished in around 2016 or 2017, Wakelet first started to get a little bit of traction. If you go back and review some of the social media posts around this time, the Wakelet Twitter account features collections across several different topics such as travel, music, sports, and current events. There was a collection called Top 20 Cities to Visit, Muhammad Ali's Best Fights, and Vegan Junk Food. The goal here was just to introduce Wakelet to a general audience. Jamil shares a little bit about this initial strategy.
And initially, it was pitched for everyone. And this is because the platform in its simple form is a bookmarking, aggregation and curation platform. And that's kind of general. We've always had ideas one day to kind of do more, like allowing people to collaborate and discover, but we always knew that we needed to initially focus our efforts, find our market fit, because we're just such a small team.
Misbah and his team also focused on introducing Wakelet to specific industries. There's videos on the Wakelet YouTube page from 2017 showing how journalists can use Wakelet to showcase their writing, or how athletes could use Wakelet to build their own brand. While it was being positioned for several different industries, eventually Jamil knew that Wakelet would have to find a core audience. But some might argue that Wakelet never really found one. It was the audience that found Wakelet. So it was 2017. Wakelet was redesigned, and the marketing team, led by Misbah, were trying to find a specific audience for the platform. While scrolling across his newsfeed on Twitter, he noticed a lot of discussion about the platform Storify.
So Storify was a social bookmarking platform, and it was quite awesome. It allowed people to, very quickly and easily save posts from Twitter, Facebook, and other social sites. And, we were just doing our kind of usual sort of listening on Twitter one day, and we discovered that they'd actually announced that they were going to be closing. And as sad as that was, it represented a bit of an opportunity for us.
In other words, the closing of Storify created a huge problem and a void for educators. And as a company, Wakelet felt they had a solution.
It was a brief but really productive meeting with the development team where we asked, what can we do to help these Storify users rescue their content? What can we do to make it as easy as possible for them to take their content from Storify and put it over onto a fresh new Wakelet account?
This whole experience was actually documented on the Wakelet YouTube channel.
The content aggregation platform Storify is closing its doors, which means plenty of its users are going to be looking for a place to migrate to. They've got lots of content saved on Storify, and Wakelet has a similar functionality in the sense that you can create a digital library of content. And plenty of Storify users right now are looking for a place to migrate that content that was on Storify and switch that over to Wakelet. So what we've been doing is helping them with that process.
They listened to users and responded quickly.
And within a week, the development team had created this really awesome import tool. So all Storify users had to do was go to a landing page on Wakelet, enter their Storify username, and just within a few clicks, every single piece of content that they'd ever saved on Storify would just import to a completely brand new Wakelet account. And most importantly, it would retain the way that it was organized as well.
The result? Hundreds of thousands of links from Storify were migrated almost instantly into Wakelet.
And the whole Storify situation taught us so much, most importantly, to always be listening. If we weren't listening to our community and listening to the space, we would never have discovered this. And, we may have missed a really cool opportunity there. And the second thing was just work really, really fast to deliver the right solutions. There were so many people who were panicking that years worth of Storify content would just get deleted once they closed their doors. And we realized that we needed to work really fast to create a welcoming, functional environment through that they could just make that transition to really seamlessly.
But more importantly, a new community of educators started to grow around Wakelet.
And one of the amazing residual results that came from the whole Storify situation was that Storify had this really passionate community of educators, and when they'd moved all their content over to Wakelet and settled down, they began to realize that, Wakelet wasn't just for saving tweets. They could use Wakelet to, create digital storytelling assignments, classroom newsletters, to help their students create digital portfolios, and a whole bunch of other awesome things that Storify wasn't doing. And this sparked an amazing level of passion from the educator community. They loved what we were doing. As they say, that spark became a flame, the flame became a fire, and the fire became a roaring furnace. And the education community that you see around Wakelet today, you could argue that it was all down to the fact that, we really listened to them right at the start, right when it really mattered.
One of those educators that Wakelet was listening to was Dr. Randall Sampson, an education consultant from Columbus, Ohio.
I came across this thing called Wakelet, and at the time it was a little clunky, and so I'm like, okay, I'll try it out, and I created an account, and I saw it, and I was like, this thing has some potential. And it was very crisp and clean, very organized. And at that time, you had a community where you could follow other people. And so I was trying to follow other people, and there was like nobody in there. I was like, hello, is anybody here?
He was surprised that Wakelet not only had the same functionality as Storify, but it also offered a lot more.
So I used it for personalized PD. So Wakelet saw me use it in all of these dynamic ways. So then we started having more conversations about the technical side of things.
The way that Wakelet was being used in the classroom led to an open dialogue with educators like Randall. They'd exchange ideas and feedback, and this discussion would ultimately help improve the product. Kathi Kersznowski is a technology integration specialist from Washington Township Public Schools in New Jersey. Like many educators, Kathi has dozens and dozens of ideas to use Wakelet in the classroom. Here's one.
Anything that has a link can be added to a Wakelet. But in addition to anything with a link, you can also drop in photos, you can drop in videos, you can drop in other Wakelets into there. You can even drop in PDFs. So there are just so many options for things. So imagine using that while you're teaching a class or if you're giving a lecture.
But months before she had these ideas, Kathi connected with Callum Nightingale from Wakelet through Twitter.
We scheduled a time, we had a video call. And he did screen share, and walked me through everything and gave me the opportunity to ask questions all along the way. So it wasn't just a demo. He wanted to hear what I thought too, kind of a feedback session, and it was powerful. And I know in the UK, it was, oh my gosh, I don't know, it was like 2:00 in the morning or something like that. Like he'll stay up late to make this happen. And I am one of, I'm going to venture a guess, not just Callum, but some other members of the team have probably done this for hundreds of people now.
As Kathi just said, this type of thing was not uncommon with Wakelet. Their team members spent a lot of time talking to educators all around the world. When it was first launched, Wakelet was positioned as a curation tool with application for any person or any industry. But by 2018, it had developed a large community of passionate educators. In fact, as Randall explains, it was the Wakelet community that helped create the Wakelet Wave hashtag, which you'll see in many social media posts.
We were talking about it, it's like, yeah, we need to start to create a Wakelet community So it's a little bit more organized because we're starting to grow and there's like people who really like this, right? And so we're kind of enhancing our Wakelet wave here. And I said, James, that's brilliant. And he's like, what? I was like, the Wakelet wave, man. You're a rock star. And so that's kind of how it picked up. And because Wakelet is about a ripple in the water, right? So when you're on a boat and it creates a wake. And now we have more people on the boat's getting bigger and it's going faster, so it's creating a wave. And so James was like, yeah, it's just creating this wave now. And I was like, oh, the Wakelet wave, that's it, James. So it just kind of organically happened. And then people start using it in the ambassador group. And then it kind of stuck. And it was kind of cool. So we're just like, okay, we'll roll with that. Now you got two hashtags, the Wakelet wave and the humans are coming.
For Jamil, it kind of brought things back full circle. Because if you remember, one of the reasons for developing a tool like Wakelet in the first place was to help him stay organized with his studies.
We always knew that we had to focus and that education was going to be a core area for us, but we didn't quite figure out how we were going to get things rolling in this market. And once we found that spark, we went all in and put all our energy behind it.
Jamil and Wakelet continue to find ways to add additional functionality to improve their platform. And in spring 2019, the company began their partnership with Microsoft.
And I'm friends with a lot of different educators on Twitter who were talking about Wakelet and tweeting about Wakelet, talking about the Wakelet wave. So that's where I learned about it. It seemed like a fun community, and after that I started to poke around and explore with it.
That's Microsoft's program manager of OneNote and Immersive Reader, Mike Tolfson. The dialogue between these two companies all started on Twitter over a feature request for OneNote.
There were a few different educators on Twitter who were talking about Wakelet, and in particular one that I know pretty well. Her name is Becky Keene. She put out a tweet one day saying, hey, wouldn't it be great if I could embed a Wakelet inside of OneNote? So I reached out to Tejas from the Wakelet engagement team on Twitter. We just direct messaged each other. I said, hey, it'd be really cool if you guys could work with us to light up this Wakelet embed inside of OneNote. And a week later, we launched a blog and a set of tweets that were essentially, hey, from a teacher tweet to reality in under a week. And that was pretty fun. I would think that was the first integration that we did between Microsoft and Wakelet.
Through this collaborative partnership, Microsoft has integrated a number of technologies into Wakelet. In fact, Mike himself has used Wakelet as a way to share some of his resources on social media.
We have all sorts of PD and trainings on Inclusive Classroom. We have videos, we have support articles, we have blog examples. And it's been really hard to communicate and share all that great information in an organized way. I put a Wakelet together of all the resources that I know, and as the product manager, I know a lot of these resources. And I've had a lot of feedback already of people saying, wow, it's so much easier to grok all of this Microsoft product information or educator information when it's in this nice organized list. I mean, I even made my most favorite one is that I call it the Microsoft Education Wakelet of Wakelets, which is I made a Wakelet of my 7 other Wakelets, and so it's like an aggregated list of lists, I guess you'd call it.
Here's what Jamil had to say about working with Microsoft.
Well, Microsoft is a great organization, and they're doing some really amazing things in the education market. And when we were talking to their teams, we could see a great fit. We like their products, we like the people, we like what they're doing, and Wakelet seemed to make sense, especially across a lot of their product suites. And that's why it kind of made sense for us to work with them and together provide more value for the educator community.
The partnership between Wakelet and Microsoft continues to grow, and as Mike explains, the reaction has been overwhelmingly positive.
The community reaction has been pretty incredible. Tejas and I have talked quite a bit. Just on Twitter alone and some of the blogs we've put out, there's just been a really great response, and there seems to be a genuine happiness between the communities is what I would say.
I wanted to know from Mike's perspective, what is it about Wakelet that made them so successful? Here's his explanation.
I think it's a few different reasons. The first is they have a good product, and that's always key, but a good product alone doesn't really make a community. I think the team itself really appreciates educators, and they celebrate educators, and they engage with educators on Twitter and on Facebook and on webinars. And when you do that and teachers feel heard as well as they listen to the community. They do an incredible job of hearing what the educator pain points are, listening to suggestions on how to improve Wakelet, and they will very rapidly listen and update. They're actually very similar if you're familiar with the product or team of Flipgrid. Flipgrid's operated the same way.
In June of 2019, the entire Wakelet team attended the ISTE EdTech conference in Philadelphia. It was the first education conference that the group attended, and one that they probably won't forget anytime soon. I'll let Randall explain why.
Oh yeah, man, they were stars, dude. Like they were like the Beatles, man. So they show up, and everywhere they go, oh, it's the Wakelet guys. I want to get my picture with James. Oh my God, there's Misbah, Calvin too. Oh my God. So I mean, it was like people were flocking to them, and I was just standing back watching it, like, yeah. And so I purposely did not wear my Wakelet shirt so the Beatles can have their moment.
You're like, hi guys. Oh, yes, big fan. Big fan. This is Wakelet.
You guys, because I use it all the time.
That audio comes from Wakelet Vlog number 17, a documentary of the ISTE weekend in Philadelphia. One of the coolest moments happened at the Flipgrid live event during that week. About 300 educators were on hand to hear Misbah announce some new integrations between Flipgrid and Wakelet. Just like at a sporting event, the audience did the wave, or I guess the Wakelet wave, as Misbah sprinted down to the stage.
We're going to start in the back of the crowd, and we are going to do a wave from the back to the front to welcome our friend Misbah on stage. So let's do the biggest Wakelet wave ever. Start in the back. Go, Misbah!
It gives me great pleasure tonight to announce the new integration between a shorts video from Flipgrid and Wakelet. Thank you very much.
When thinking back to his experience at ISTE, Misbah was blown away.
ISTE was a phenomenal experience. I mean, you know, when we headed to Philadelphia, we didn't really know what to expect. We knew that there were a lot of, community members and ambassadors that were waiting for us there. But when we got there, we got to the conference hall, and within 5 minutes, we were getting people recognizing us and coming up to us and saying, oh my God, it's the Wakelet team. Can we get a photograph? Can we get a selfie? And, through that, we had these amazing human interactions where we got to hear what the teachers were using Wakelet for, all their impact stories, how they were using it in the classroom, loads of feedback. And this just continued throughout the whole conference. On the first day, we got back to the hotel exhausted, and we kind of just looked at each other and were like, whoa, it really hit home the impact that we were having on these educators. And it made us realize that we have to remember that in everything that we do at Wakelet, every feature that we put out, every new functionality that gets added. We have to realize that this is having an impact. And it was so motivating, it was so energizing, and the whole conference was just incredible.
And Wakelet, a platform which was originally conceived after Jamil struggled with organization in school, is now helping educators and students curate all kinds of information and media. In 2018, Jamil had the chance to see Wakelet in action, helping to support some of the youngest learners. While attending a business meeting in the U.S., Jamil met up with Randall, and they traveled to North Carolina to visit Brandy Reams, a kindergarten teacher who had used Wakelet for a variety of purposes, including parent communication. This entire experience is captured in Wakelet Vlog 16 on the Wakelet YouTube channel.
Remember I told you the guys that made our website that we use all the time, that they were coming to see you? Do you guys want to show them how we use Wakelet?
Randall was there that day, and here's what he recalls.
It's one thing to sit behind the computer and to put the programming in and to kind of talk to people via Skype, but to see kids actually use it and to see it interactive in the classroom with teachers, that was like the aha moment. And I think Jamil, once he was talking to the kids, he stepped out of the classroom and was like, whoa, that was inspiring. I want to become a teacher. I'm like, whoa, easy. But it's, you catch that bug, right? Because when you're in front of kids for the first time and they're so attentive and so inquisitive and have so many questions, and you can feel the energy. And he was like, wow, now I see what teachers see.
This was really no exaggeration. Seeing students in the classroom using Wakelet, the product he had worked so hard to create for many years, was really powerful. I asked Jamil how he felt standing in that classroom, watching these 5- and 6-year-olds use Wakelet.
Honestly, a little bit emotional and confused. I wasn't expecting what I saw when I visited the schools in America. At the end of the day, Wakelet was initially designed for people over the age of 13, mainly because of data privacy and content restrictions online. So when I walked into Brandy's classroom and saw the students, literally in kindergarten, benefiting from the platform because of what Brandy had put together, I was so surprised. Then she explained to me that the parents and colleagues were so happy that they now had visibility of what she was teaching in the classroom every day, the resources she collected, and what was happening in the school. I was a little bit taken back. And it made me understand there's a lot more we can do to make Wakelet even more accessible to people under that age.
Just like that airplane wake that leaves the trail in the sky on a clear day, millions of educators around the world are creating wakes or telling stories with Wakelet. This long shot of an idea by an Airbus employee that was rejected over and over again turned out to resonate in the education community and beyond. It's been said that we all have something to leave behind in our wake. So what is in the wake of this company? Determination, some good luck, and definitely a lot of hard work. Maybe even some uncertainty. And Jamil is okay with that. To close this episode, here's Jamil reflecting on his journey as founder of Wakelet.
So I was speaking to one of my friends a few days ago, and he said to me, "What I love about what you've achieved so far is that you're still as motivated as when you started, if not even more. I've seen your journey right from the beginning, from when you had this idea to nobody believing you. You always stayed persistent and always found a way, and now you've got real traction." Now in between all this, I remember a period of time where we kept working hard without much happening. And to be honest, that's how things are sometimes. But we just kept believing, kept working hard, and eventually, by being around, we created our own luck. And in this case, good timing with Storify. And when that moment came along, we didn't even think twice. We just jumped on the opportunity, engaged with users, started to gain traction, and focused on building our community. And we kept evolving and improving the platform. And the rest was history. And for sure, there were a lot of turbulent and scary days. But when I look back at where we are today, and the love that we've gained for the product and for the team, it makes all that pain and hard work really worth it. And there's nothing more rewarding and more motivating than that.
So that's it. I hope you enjoyed the story of Wakelet. Now, it's been a few months since I spoke with Jamil and the rest of the crew, and in that time, Wakelet has continued to add new features and integrations with Microsoft. As a company, they've traveled to India and other technology conferences. And recently, on their Twitter account, Misbah announced a new student ambassador course. You can check that and everything else about Wakelet out at their website, wakelet.com, or on social media at Wakelet. Right now, stay tuned for a preview of the next episode of EdTech Stories. So, Latasha, Rage, and much more. You can find more info at edtechstories.com. And again, an extra thank you to Jamil and the Wakelet crew for trusting me to tell their story on the first episode of this podcast.